Assalamualaikum to each and everyone, especially to our instructor, Sir Musa Unos, sir. So in this video, or our group is assigned to discuss the lesson 4 and entitled Social, Political, Economic, and Cultural Issues in the Philippines. So let us begin the discussion. So the overview of this lesson is dedicated to enduring issues in the Philippines society which history could lend a hand in understanding and hopefully proposing solutions. These topics include the mandated discussions on the Philippines and constitutions, policies, and agrarian reform and taxation. It is hoped that these discussions will help us propose recommendations or solutions to present-day problems based on our understanding of root causes and how we anticipated future scenarios in the Philippines setting. So the learning objectives of this lesson is at the end of this lesson, the student can analyze social, political, economics, and cultural issues in the Philippines using lens of history and recognizes the problems of today are consequences of the decisions and events that happened in the past. And the last one is understanding several enduring issues in the Philippine society through history and propose recommendations or solutions to present-day problems based on the understanding of the past and anticipation of the future through the study of history. By the way, I am your first reporter for this group. I am June Magelna, and I'm going to discuss the evolution of the Constitution of the Philippines. So let us start. So the evolution of the Philippine Constitution is that the Constitution, or let us define what is Constitution. So the Constitution is defined as a set of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which state or other organizations is governed. Thus, the word itself means to be part of the whole, the coming together of distinct entities into one group with the same principles and ideas. This principle is defined as nature of extent of government. So the Constitution of the Philippines is supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines, has been in effect since 1987. There are only three constitutions or other constitutions that have effectively governed in the country. So what are those three constitutions? So we have the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. Number two is 1973 Constitution and the 1986 Freedom Constitution. However, there were earlier constitution attempt by Filipino in the struggle of break free from the colonial war. What does it mean? So, ang constitution daw is ito yung nagsisilbing kumbaga palatandaan or so sinusunod na mga batas ng isang bansa. So here in the Philippines and here in our country, we have currently 6 constitution. So the number one constitution is 1897 Constitution of Biak na Bato. And the number 2 is 1899 Malolos Constitution. Number 3 is 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. Number 4 is 1973 Constitution of Authoritarianism. And number 5 is 1987 Constitution after martial law. And number 6 is attempt to amend or change the 1987 Constitution. So those are the constitution that our group will be discussing in this video. So let us welcome our next reporter or the first reporter for the first constitution to be discussed in this video.
Good day, I am Mar Usman Lamundao, the assigned reporter of 1897 Constitution of the Biak na Bato and 1899 Malolos Constitution. Before I'm going to start, let me give some overview about the topic and some question about this topic. And now let's start about what is Constitution. The foundation of system of government of the Philippines is the Constitution. Constitution is defined in its broad sense. The term Constitution refers to the body of the rules and principles in accordance with which the powers of the sovereignty is regularly exercised. And that is the concise definition of Constitution in our country. And now let's move on to the proper part of the discussion, which is the 1897 Constitution of the Biak na Bato and 1899 Malolos Constitution. The 1897 Constitution of Biak na Bato was promulgated by the Philippine Revolutionary Government on November 1, 1897. This was headed by our late former President Emilio Aguinaldo. This constitution is the first constitution of the country. Aim for the establishment of Supreme Council what would serve as the highest governing body of the Republic of the Philippines. The Constitution borrowed from Cuba was written by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer in Spanish and later on translated into Tagalog. According to General Emilio Aguinaldo, was the President of the Philippines who wrote in 1899, the main condition of the Biak na Bato, a charter based on the Cuban, was also conceived by Felix Ferrer and Isabelo Artacho. Signed on November 18, 1897, the Biak na Bato Constitution provided for the creation of the Supreme Council to serve as the supreme body of the Republic's government. He also describes some fundamental human rights such as freedom of religion, freedom of press, and the right to education. The organs of the government under the Constitution were they have three given organs that needs to implement by the Constitution of Biak na Bato. Number 1, the Supreme Council, which was vested the power of the Republic, headed by the President and the 4 departments of the Secretaries, the Interior, the Foreign Affairs, the Treasury, and the War. The second is the Consejo Supremo de Garcia y Justicia, Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, which was given the authority to make decisions and affirm or disprove the sentences rendered by other court and to dictate rules for the administration of justice. And number 3, the Asamblea de Representantes, Assembly of the Representatives, which was to be convened after revolution to create a new constitution and to elect a new council of government and representative of the people. The Constitution of Biak na Bato was never fully implemented since assures the fact the Biak na Bato was signed between the Spanish and the Philippine Revolutionary Army. Then, the fact was signed in San Miguel, Bulacan, in the house of Pablo Texon, a Philippine Revolutionary captain who served as a Brigadier General in the Brigada del Pilar of the General Gregorio del Pilar during the Revolution. And now let's proceed for the preamble of Constitution of the Biak na Bato. The separation of the Philippines from the Spanish monarchy and their formation into an independent state with its own government called the Philippine Republic has been the end of sought by the revolution in the existing war, began on the 24th of August 1896. Therefore, in its name and by the power of delegated by the Filipino, interpreting faithfully their desires and ambition, we the representatives of the revolution in a meeting at Biak na Bato, November 1, 1897, unanimously adopted the following articles for the Constitution of the state. And that's all for the Constitution of the Biak na Bato. And now let's proceed for the 1899 Malolos Constitution. After the signing of the truce, the Filipino revolutionary leaders accepted a payment from Spain and went to exile in Hong Kong. Upon the defeat of the Spanish to the Americans in the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, the United States never transported Aguinaldo back to the Philippines. The newly reformed Philippine Revolutionary Forces reverted to the control of Aguinaldo, and the Philippine Declaration of Independence was issued on June 12, 1898. Together with several decrees that formed the first Filipino Republic, Malolos Congress was selected, which a commission to draw up a draft constitution, the Constitution, the September 17, 1898, which was composed of wealthy and educated men. The document came up with the approved by the Congress on November 29, 1898, and promulgated by Aguinaldo on January 21, 1899, was titled The Political Constitution of 1899 and written in Spanish. The Constitution has 39 articles divided into 14 titles with 8 articles of transitory provision and a final additional article. The document was patterned after the Spanish Constitution of 1812 with influences from the chapter of Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, and the French Constitution of 1793 according to Felipe Calderon, main author of the Constitution of these countries, were studied because they shared similar social, political, ethnological, and governance conditions with the Philippines. Prior constitutional projects in the Philippines also influenced the Malolos Constitution, namely the Cartilla and the Sangguniang Hukuman, the Charter of Laws and Moral of the Katipunan, written by Emilio Jacinto in 1896. Biak na Bato Constitution of 1897 planned by Isabela Artacho, Mavini Constitution Program of the Philippines Republic of 1898, the Provisional Constitution of Mariano Ponce in 1898, that followed the Spanish Constitution, and the Autonomy Project of the Paterno in 1898. And now let's move on for the most important part, the preamble of the Political Constitution of 1898. With the representatives of the Filipino people lawfully convened in order to establish justice, provided for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the benefits of the liberty, imploring the aid of the sovereign legislator or of the universe for the attainment of these ends, have voted, decreed, and sanctioned the following political constitution as a direct challenge to colonial authorities of the Spanish Empire. The sovereignty was reiterated to the people as a legal principle underlying the Philippines Revolution. The people delegated government function to civil servants while they retained actual sovereignty. The 27 articles of the title Title number 4 detail the natural rights and the popular sovereignty of the Filipino, the enumeration of which does not imply the provision of any other rights not expressly stated. Title number 2, Article 7 also declares that the state recognizes the freedom and the equality of all belief, as well as the church, separation of church and the state. These are direct reaction for feature of the Spanish government in the Philippines, where the friars were the dominant agents of the state. The form of government according to Title number 2, Article 4 is to be popular, representative, alternative, and responsible, and shall exercise 3 distinct powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. The legislative power was based in a unicameral body called the Assembly of Representatives, members of which are elected for terms of 4 years. Execution power was based in the President and elected by a Constitution Assembly of the Assembly of Representatives. And Special Representative, the President will serve a term of 4 years without re-election. There was no vice president, and in the case of vacancy, a president was to be selected by the Constitution Assembly. The 1899 Malolos Constitution was never enforced due to the ongoing war. The Philippines was effectively and territory of the United States upon the signing of the Treaty of the Paris between Spain and the United States, transferring sovereignty of the Philippines on December 10, 1898.
Good day to everyone. Assalamualaikum and a pleasant day to all of you. I am Arbaina S. Lintang and I am the third presenter. So today's topic that I will be discussing with you is one of the most important eras in Philippine political history, the 1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. What is Commonwealth? It is independent country or community, especially a democratic republic. It means the Commonwealth is also known as a public where the independent is independent. And when we say a democratic republic, this is for a government operating in the Philippines, and adopted from the public and a democracy. And we all know that democracy is a system of government in which the people hold power through the representatives they shake in free or through elections. Okay. Kumbaga, ito ay isang sistemang pamahalaan na kung saan ang mga mamamayan ang humahawak ng kapangyarihan sa pamamagitan ng pagtatag ng eleksyon. And we also have it here in the other meaning of Commonwealth. A nation, state, or other political unit such as one founded on law and united by compact or tacit agreement of the people for the common good. Ito raw ay kasunduan ng mga tao para sa kabutihan. So, here's the little background of 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. The 1935 Constitution provided the legal basis of the Commonwealth government, which was considered as transition government before the granting of the Philippine independence with American-inspired Constitution. The 1935 Constitution was written in 1934, approved, adopted by the Commonwealth of the Philippines 1935 to 1946, and later used by the Third Republic 1946 to 1972. After the Treaty of Paris, the Philippines was subject to the power of the United States of America, effectively the new colonizers of the country. So, after Spanish colonization, yung Amerika naman ang bagong sumakop sa ating bansa, the new colonizer of the country. So, from 1898 to 1901, the Philippines would be under military government until civil government would be put into place. So, the signing of that treaty arise on December 10, 1989. The Spain gave up our land, which is the Philippines, to the United States. So, beginning of 1901, the military government was replaced by a civilian government. So, ano-ano nga ba ang mga pangyayari bago na itatag ang Philippine Commonwealth? So, bago sumapit ang 1985, itinalaga ng United States of America si Frank Murphy bilang Gobernador General ng Pilipinas upang mamahala sa ating bansa. So, since tayo nga ay sinakop ng mga Amerikano, hindi na nakakagulat kung sila ang namamahala sa ating bansa sa panahong iyon. So, during the time, two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to hate qualities of constitutionally. So, ang una is Philippine Organic Act of 1902. So, ang Philippine Bill of 1902 ay isinulat o ginawa ni Henry A. Cooper. Philippine Organic Act of 1902, the first organic law was the Philippine Islands that provided for the creation of a popularity elected Philippine Assembly. So, ang batas na ito ay unang batas na nag-provide para sa paglikha ng isang tanyag na napiling assembly, which is ito ang nag-provide ng paggawa ng binobotong Assemblea ng Pilipinas. The act specified that legislative power would be vested in bicameral legislature composed of the Philippine Commission as the upper house and the Philippine Assembly as lower house. Ang tinutukoy na batas na ito na ang kapangyarihang pambatasan ay ibibigay sa bicameral legislature or ipagkakaloob ito sa upper house or lower house Philippines Assembly. At ang key provision provision sa batas na ito ay Bill of Rights for Filipinos or karapatan ng mga Pilipino na nagtatalakay dito ng pagbibigay ng mga karapatan sa malayang pananalita at pagpapahayag ng kalayaang huwag mabilanggo dahil sa pagkakautang, pagiging pantay-pantay sa harap ng batas at kalayaan mula sa pagkaalipin. And lastly, appointment of two non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines as representative to the United States House of Representatives. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, ang pag-a-appoint ng dalawang Filipino president commissioners na magre-representa sa Pilipinas sa Kongreso ng Estados Unidos. Sa bisa ng batas na ito, itinatag ang Asamblea o Batasan ng Pilipinas noong Hulyo 13, 1907 ginanap ang halalan. At ang pagpapasinaya ay ginanap noong October 16, 1901 sa Grand Opera House at naging speaker si Sir Sergio Osmeña at si Manuel L. Quezon naman ang pinuno ng higit na napakarami ng kasapi. Nagsisilbing itong saligang batas ng Pilipinas sa ilalim ng pananakop ng Estados Unidos hanggang sa mapalitan ito ng Batas Jones 1916.
So, the second act that functioned as a constitution was the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, also known as Jones Law, by William Atkinson Jones. The Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916 or Jones Law modified the structure of the Philippine government through the removal of the Philippine Commission, replacing it with a Senate that served as the upper house and its members elected by the Filipino voters, the first truly elected national legislature.
So, ang Batas Jones daw o ang Philippine Autonomy ay ang batas na nagbibigay sa Pilipino ng kalayaang magsarili at pangako na pagkalooban ng kasarinlan sa Pilipinas sa lalong madaling panahon kapag nagkaroon na ang bayan ng isang matatag na pamahalaan. And this is the most important at pinakamataas na batas raw ng Pilipinas simula noong 1916 hanggang 1935 ng pagtibay ang saligang batas ng Pilipinas. And the next law was Hair Hose Cutting Act 1932. Ito ay ang batas pangkalayaan na ginawa nila Butler B. Hare, Harry B. Hose, and Bronson M. Cutting.
Hair Hose Cutting Act 1932. Hair Hose Cutting Act was the first U.S. law passed setting a process and a date for the Philippines to gain independence from the United States.
So, the final goal of these laws granting a concrete independence to the Philippines, ito ang naging daan tungo sa kalayaan ng bansang Pilipinas. However, the bill did not make several key provision. Hindi sinaad dito ang pagbitaw ng mga Amerikano sa iilang mahahalagang aspeto gaya ng pagwakas ng karipan ng asukal at paggawa ng malayang pakikipagkalakalan ng bagong malayang Pilipinas. And with the efforts of the Filipino Independence Mission led by Sergio Osmeña and Manuel Rojas, the law promised Philippine independence after 10 years but reserved several military and naval bases for the United States, as well as imposed traffic and quotas on Philippine imports. So, the bill was opposed by the Senate President Manuel L. Quezon and consequently rejected by the Philippine Senate. So, dahilan kaya noong 1934, isang bagong batas ang ipinasa ng Kongreso ng Estados Unidos at ito ay Batas Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as Philippine Independence Act 1934. And this act was authored by Senator Millard E. Tidings and the Representative John McDuffie, and this signed by American President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay. Tidings McDuffie Act, also known as Philippine Independence Act 1934, and it was passed by the United States Congress that provided authority and defined mechanism for the establishment of a formal constitution by a constitutional convention. So, ito ang batas na nagbibigay sa Pilipinas ng kalayaan. Nakasaad sa batas Tidings McDuffie ang plano ng kasarinlan ng Pilipinas sa loob ng 10 taon tradition period na magsisimula sa pagkabuo ng gobyernong Commonwealth. And the members of the convention were elected and held their first meeting on July 30, 1934 with Claro M. Recto unanimously elected as president. So, this act generally received large-scale support in the Philippines, kaya inaprubahan ito sa Senado ng ating bansa.
So let's proceed to the primary source. Preamble of the 1935 Commonwealth. Primary source: the Filipino people imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody their ideals, conserve and develop the patrimony of the nation, promote the general welfare, and secure to themselves and their prosperity the blessings of independence under a regime of justice, liberty, and democracy. Do ordain and promulgate this Constitution.
Let's go back to the topic. The Constitution created the Commonwealth of the Philippines that governed the Philippines from 1935 to 1946. Okay, so the Philippine Independence Act, ang Constitution na ito ay ito ang gumawa ng Commonwealth sa Pilipinas. At ito rin ang nag-govern sa ating bansa noong 1935 hanggang 1946. And it is a transitional administration to prepare the country towards its full achievement of independence. So, ito rin ang paghahanda ng ating bansa towards its full achievement of becoming an independent country, to preparation of our country as a whole. And it originally provided for unicameral National Assembly with a president and vice president elected to a 6-year term without re-election. So meaning, in Commonwealth law, here begins the election of the president and vice president who have only 6 years term without re-election. And up until now, we have all been aware that those elected as president and vice president have only served for 6 years in the service of our country, or hanggang 6 na taon lang silang maglilingkod sa ating bansa.
It is amended in 1940 to have a bicameral Congress as well as the creation of an independent electoral commission.
So, to create an independent electoral commission, so this is one who takes decision on every aspect of conduct and control elections, from the announcement of elections through the declaration of results. And right to suffrage were originally afforded to male citizens of the Philippines who are 21 years of age or over and are able to read and write. So, originally afforded sa mga lalaking citizens ng Pilipinas is 21 years of age pataas na marunong magbasa at magsulat. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Constitutional Convention on February 8, 1935 and ratified by then U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt on March 25, 1935. So, the first thing that required for the new Commonwealth government was a new constitution na siyang magiging sandigan ng independenting nation. So, yun na nga, nung July 30, 1934, Constitutional Convention was convened in Manila. After several months of declaration, isang bagong saligang batas ang inaprubahan on February 8, 1935 at ipinagtibay ni President Franklin D. Roosevelt on March 25, 1935. Elections were held in September 1935 and Manuel L. Quezon was elected President of the Commonwealth. And after that, isang halalan sa pagkapangulo ang ginanap noong September 16, 1935. The candidates included former President Emilio Aguinaldo Bapa. And it was attended by millions of Filipinos to elect the President and the Vice President of the country. And the winner was the Nationalist Party candidate, Manuel L. Quezon, as President. And Sergio Osmeña was elected as Vice President of the Commonwealth. At si Sir Sergio Osmeña naman ang nanalo as Vice President of the Commonwealth. With the establishment of the Commonwealth, there was a big change. What were the management program of Manuel L. Quezon and Sergio Osmeña? Or ano nga ba ang mga programa sa pamamahala ni Manuel L. Quezon at Sergio Osmeña? So these are the programs administered by Manuel L. Quezon and Sergio Osmeña during the Commonwealth Constitution. The first is the National Defense Act. So the purpose of this act was created an independent Philippine military. And second one is women have the right to vote in political elections. So kinilala ang karapatan ng mga kababaihan na bumoto. Nabigyan na ang mga kababaihan ng pagkakataon gamitin ang boto nila sa halalan. Dahil sa panahon ng Espanyol ay hindi sila nabigyan ng chance na makapag-aral dahil ang tungkulin lang nila noon o itinatag sa kanila ay pangbahay lamang. So sa panahon ng Commonwealth, marami na ang babae na naging professional at halos karamihan sa mga professional ngayon ay mga kababaihan na. Kaya't nakatulong ng malaki sa ekonomiya ng bansa ang mga ito. And third one, katarungan panlipunan. So, it is the responsibility of the government to safeguard the welfare of the people what they deserve. So, ito ay upang masiguro na mabigyan ng pamahalaan na pangalagaan ang kapakanan ng mga tao laban sa mapang-abusong mga mamamayan at ibigay sa mga tao kung ano ang nararapat para sa kanila. And fourth, pagtatag ng pambansang wika. So, ito naman is noong December 1937, inaprubahan na ni President Manuel L. Quezon ang ating Tagalog ay ang ating pambansang wika. And lastly is Homestead Act. Ito ay tumutukoy sa sukat na maaaring tirahan ng isang mamamayan.
So, sa panahon ng Commonwealth Constitution, ang pinakamalaking tinuturing na pagbabago ay ang democratic nation sa buhay ng mga Pilipino. Dahil nga bukod sa pagbabagong anyo ng pamahalaan ng Pilipinas, ay binago na rin ng demokrasya ang sistema ng pamumuhay, pagpapahalaga, pagkikitungo at pananaw ng mga Pilipino. Kung ikukumpara natin sa panahon ng Espanyol at Amerikano, ang mas maganda ang naging buhay ng mga Pilipino noong ang sumakop sa atin ay ang mga Amerikano. Malaki ang ibinago ng Commonwealth Constitution sa pamumuhay ng mga Pilipino at dahil sa Commonwealth, nagkaroon din ng chance ang mga Pilipino na bumoto sa kanilang gustong Pangulo at sa kanilang gustong maging Vice Presidente na mamamalakas sa ating bansa. Napakalaki ng pagbabago noong panahon ng Commonwealth. But sad to say, the Commonwealth was briefly interrupted by the events of the World War II, with Japanese occupying the Philippines. So nahinto yung Commonwealth nung nag-colonize yung mga Japanese sa ating bansa. But afterwards, upon liberation, the Philippines was declared an independent republic on July 4, 1946. So that is all the history of 1935 Commonwealth Constitution.